They laughed at him on the first morning, right there in the open, in front of everyone. And the man who started it had no idea what he had just set in motion. Before we get into it, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from, and hit subscribe. Tomorrow's story is going to hit differently. Marcus Ellery woke up at 4:47 in the morning, not because his alarm went off, because he had been lying awake since 3:00, staring at the ceiling, running through everything in his head the way a surgeon reviews a procedure before the first cut. Careful, deliberate, no wasted motion. He stood at the bathroom mirror and looked at himself for a long time, not out of vanity, out of something closer to reckoning. The face looking back at him had 42 years of life written into it. There were lines around his eyes that weren't there a decade ago. His jaw was set the way it always was when he had made a decision he wasn't going to unmake. On the shelf behind him, 2 framed photographs and a small wooden plaque. The photographs were from national judo competitions, 12 years apart, both won. The plaque said first place, but it had been sitting there so long it had almost become invisible. Marcus didn't think about those things much. He thought about what they had cost him to earn. Early mornings before the sun came up. A discipline so deeply built into his body that it had become something closer to breathing than effort. He had wanted to be a police officer since he was 14 years old, and the reason was not complicated. His uncle, Raymond Ellery, had been a decorated firefighter who one evening made the mistake of driving home through the wrong part of the city in the wrong kind of car. A routine stop became something else. Raymond hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't raised his voice. He had sat with his hands visible on the dashboard and answered every question in a calm and measured tone, the way a man answers questions when he knows that anything else could cost him everything. Marcus had heard the story from his mother's kitchen table, watching Raymond describe it without anger, because Raymond had long ago converted his anger into something more useful. What Marcus had felt in that kitchen, sitting across from a man he respected more than anyone else in the world, was not rage. It was clarity. A door opening in his mind that he understood in that moment he would spend the rest of his life walking through. He pulled on his clothes slowly. He checked his paperwork folder twice. He picked up his keys and walked downstairs. His father, Gerald Ellery, was already in the kitchen. Gerald was 61 years old, and he moved through the world with the particular deliberateness of a man who had fought for everything he had and never forgotten what the fight cost. He poured Marcus a cup of coffee without being asked and set it on the counter. "You ready?" Gerald said. Marcus picked up the coffee. "I've been ready for 20 years. Gerald looked at his son for a moment, just looked at him. Then he nodded once, the way men nod when there are no words that do the job better than silence. Marcus drove to the Westfield District training facility with the radio off. The city was still mostly dark, delivery trucks and streetlights and a few early joggers moving through the gray. He kept both hands on the wheel and his breathing even. He was not nervous. He was focused. Those are 2 different things. The facility sat at the end of a long flat road on the industrial side of the district. It was the kind of building that made no attempt to be welcoming. Concrete and old brick, narrow windows placed too high to see out of, a parking lot that needed work. A flagpole out front with the city flag hanging perfectly still in the windless morning. Marcus arrived 4 minutes early. He sat in the car for a moment and surveyed the lot. Other trainees were already arriving. He counted them. 11, including himself. They moved in small clusters toward the entrance, talking quietly, wearing the standard-issue training kit, white shirts and dark pants, fabric stiff and clean. Marcus was the only black man in the group. He noted it the way a pilot notes weather, not with surprise, with information. It told him what kind of flight this might be. He got out of the car, picked up his folder, walked to the entrance at a steady, unhurried pace. The door was heavy and closed behind him with a sound like a lock turning. The morning started with a lineup on the outer drill ground, white shirts catching the early sun. 11 trainees standing straight, carrying the nervous energy of a first day. Marcus found his place in the line and stood with his chin level and his eyes forward. Sergeant Vincent Holt came around the corner of the building the way certain men enter rooms, like the room should consider itself lucky. He was not physically imposing. Medium height, compact frame, somewhere in his mid-50s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from something deliberately unpleasant. His uniform was pressed to an almost theatrical degree. His badge was polished bright enough to throw light. His boots were mirror clean against the pale concrete of the drill ground. He walked the line slowly without speaking. He stopped at a trainee with a loose collar and stared at it for a full 4 seconds. Nobody breathed. He moved on. When he reached Marcus, he stopped. He looked at him the way someone looks at an item they didn't order that arrived anyway. He looked down at his clipboard, found the name, let a beat pass. Ellery, he said it like a sentence. Son, the community center runs a self-defense class on Tuesday nights. Might be more your speed. Laughter broke from 2 or 3 trainees near the end of the line, sharp and quick and gone just as fast. Marcus did not move. He did not look at the people laughing. He looked at Holt with the same steady, level gaze he brought to competition, to the mat, to every moment where someone was trying to take something from him by making him flinch first. He let the laughter die completely. Then he said calmly, without heat, "I appreciate that, Sergeant. I'll keep it in mind if this doesn't work out." The laughter stopped. Something shifted in Holt's expression, subtle and fast, like a door closing in a room you weren't supposed to see into. He had expected embarrassment. He had expected the drop of the eyes, the red cheeks, the stammered apology. That was the architecture of the whole thing, and Marcus had simply declined to enter it. Holt moved on down the line, but his eyes came back to Marcus twice before the morning session ended. Marcus noticed both times. The first week was a study in pressure, applied with precision. Holt assigned Marcus the heaviest training pack in the equipment pile on day 1, 13 pounds over the standard issue. He framed it as a conditioning assessment. He added extra laps at the end of group runs with no explanation beyond something about endurance metrics. In classroom sessions, he called on Marcus with technical questions and then interrupted the answers before they were complete. None of it was provable as anything other than rigorous instruction. That was the craft of it. That was what made it work. Marcus ran every extra lap, answered every question, carried the extra weight without complaint or commentary. He understood instinctively that the goal of every provocation was to give Holt something usable, a reaction, an outburst, a moment of frustration that could be written up, filed, and converted into the beginning of the end. He gave Holt nothing. What Holt did not know, what he could not have known, was that Marcus had spent 21 years training under one of the most respected judo coaches in the country. That the discipline he was showing now wasn't performance or effort. It was simply who he was, down at the bone level, forged so deeply it had become something that couldn't be taken from the outside. On day 5, the defensive tactics session began. Holt paired Marcus with a trainee named Cole Beaumont. Cole was built like a refrigerator with ambitions. Wide shoulders, thick neck, the kind of physical presence that made most people take a small step back when he walked into a room. He cracked his knuckles loudly before the drill began and moved to his starting position without making eye contact with Marcus. Before the drill was called, Holt walked to Cole's end of the field and leaned in close. Marcus watched it from across the marked drill ground. He couldn't hear anything, but he saw Cole's expression shift, the slow nod, the corners of his mouth pulling up in a way that meant something. "Begin," Holt said. Cole came across the ground fast, not training fast, not drill-controlled. He threw his full weight forward like a weapon, shoulder aimed at Marcus's chest, designed to end this in the first 2 seconds. Marcus stepped aside. It was not dramatic. There was no spin, no leap. Cole's momentum carried him past empty air, and he stumbled 2 steps before catching himself. He turned, reset, came again. This time his elbow came up hard toward Marcus's jaw. Not a drill move, not a calibrated training contact. The kind of shot meant to send a message about what kind of exercise this actually was. Marcus caught the arm, turned it, and used Cole's own drive to bring him down. Cole hit the ground on his back hard enough that the sound echoed off the concrete wall of the building behind them. Nobody in the line said a word. Cole got up, his jaw was set. He looked at Holt once, just briefly. The third attempt was slower and lower. A wrestler's grab, going for the legs. Marcus let him close the distance, shifted his hips and weight in a single, efficient motion, and Cole went face first into the packed ground. He lay still for a moment. Then he pushed himself up, slowly, a streak of pale dust across his white shirt, a mark spreading across his left cheekbone. Marcus stood in the center of the drill area. His breathing was controlled. His shirt was damp with sweat at the back from the morning run. He had not raised his voice. He had not thrown a single aggressive strike. He had simply redirected what came at him, the way a door redirects the wind. Cleanly, without drama. He turned and looked at Holt. "Drill's complete, Sergeant." Holt's face was controlled, but something behind his eyes was moving. It was the look of a man shifting from casual cruelty to something more deliberate, more calculated. He was no longer dismissing Marcus. He was deciding what to do about him. Mounted under the narrow eave of the building, angled toward the drill ground at a slight downward tilt, a security camera recorded everything. It had been there for 9 years. Nobody had verified its field of view in at least 4. It had caught all of it. The formal complaint arrived 3 days later. Marcus's suspension from the training rotation was delivered in a manila envelope by an administrative assistant named Prout, a young man who held the folder too tightly and made careful eye contact with the parking lot instead of with Marcus. Marcus read the complaint standing next to his car in the morning cold. It was clean, precise, the kind of language that looked like objectivity to someone who didn't know how the instrument worked. Excessive and unprovoked physical contact during a controlled defensive tactics exercise. Training partner sustained injury. Conduct inconsistent with program standards. Recommend immediate suspension pending review. Cole Beaumont was referred to only as training partner. Holt's pre-drill instruction to Cole, the lean-in that Marcus and every other trainee on that field had watched happen, was not mentioned. Marcus's measured, technically precise response was described as an escalation. He sat in the driver's seat and read it twice. Then he noticed something. A reference code in the upper right corner. A string of letters and numbers that looked like administrative noise. He pulled out his phone and opened the public civil litigation database his father had walked him through years ago, used primarily by attorneys researching department conduct history. He typed in the prefix. 4 records came back. His was the most recent. The 3 before it were spread across 8 years. Same prefix, same form structure, same sparse clinical language. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, a text message, 4 words and a question mark. They've done this before. Marcus stared at the building through the windshield. 3 others before you, came the follow-up. He looked at the unknown number for a long moment. Can we meet? He typed back. Her name was Sonia Adami. She was 28, currently in her 3rd week of the training program, and she had chosen a coffee shop 9 blocks from the facility because she had thought carefully about how far was far enough. She was already in the corner booth when Marcus arrived, back to the wall, eyes on the door, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She had short, natural hair, and the careful eyes of someone who had already learned that the people who were supposed to be on your side sometimes weren't. She didn't have much. She was clear about that from the start. She had fragments, Pieces of conversations she had overheard from doorways, a comment from a second-year officer who'd gone through the program 6 years ago, an unfinished sentence from a building administrator who had stopped speaking the moment Sonia walked into the room. But she had a name, one of the 3 people from the earlier records, a woman named Priya Chandran who had fought her complaint for 7 months and lost. Marcus thanked her, he paid the check, he drove home. He called his father that night. Gerald Ellery had spent 32 years as a civil rights attorney. He had been waiting for this call, Marcus could tell, from the way he picked up before the second ring. Marcus read the reference codes to him slowly and clearly, the way Gerald had taught him. No interpretation, no editorializing, just the facts in order. Gerald listened without interrupting. "Give me until morning," he said. He called back at 7:30. 3 prior complaints, same prefix code, same form template, 8-year span, 2 names traceable. One, a man named Devin Ashworth, had moved out of state 18 months after his complaint. No forwarding information. The second was Priya Chandran, local, listed address in the East Side, a phone number attached to the record. And the third, Gerald said, his voice dropping slightly, had not gone quietly. Her name was Lena Vasquez. She had hired an attorney, filed a formal dispute, requested witness testimony, pushed for 8 months. A union representative had met with her once in a conference room and told her, almost gently, that the union existed to support its officers, and she wasn't an officer yet. Marcus wrote all 3 names on a notepad. He underlined Lena's name. He drove to the East Side to look for Devin Ashworth's last address. The building manager told him Devin had moved out over a year ago and hadn't left anything behind. Marcus sat in the car outside for a while. Then he drove away. Devin Ashworth was gone. He understood why. When the machine grinds you up and spits you out, some people don't stay near the machine. Priya Chandran's number rang 4 times. When she answered, her voice was careful in a way that told Marcus she had been expecting a call she didn't want, at some point from someone. He explained who he was, what had happened, what he and his father had found about the pattern. She was quiet for a long moment. "I hear you," she said finally. "I do, but I have a daughter now and a job I can't lose, and I spent 8 months fighting something that broke a piece of me I never fully got back. I'm sorry about what happened to you, genuinely, but I can't go back there. I can't." The line went quiet. "I understand," Marcus said, and he meant it completely, which made it the hardest thing he'd said in a long time. He sat in the car after hanging up, with the weight of what Priya had just said settling into the space around him. He didn't blame her. He didn't have the right to blame her. He had his father. He had resources, access, 30 years of legal experience living in his childhood home. Most people got processed out and disappeared because they had no tools to do anything else. He dialed Lena Vasquez last. It rang 3 times, then she answered. "Yes," cautious, alert. Marcus told her his name, told her the precinct, told her what Holt had done and what his father had found. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the silence of someone making a decision. "Tell me what you need," she said. Marcus's father filed the formal complaint package with the department's HR division by hand. He drove there himself. He stood at the reception desk until the receiving clerk signed for it and stamped the acknowledgement copy. He folded the stamped copy into the inside pocket of his jacket and drove back to his office. He had been doing this long enough to know that a paper trail with a gap in it was just evidence with a hole. 2 days passed. Marcus organized. He built a timeline on his kitchen table, index cards and tape, every event in sequence, every name, every date, every reference number. He read the department's HR policy manual from the first page to the last and found 3 separate procedures that Holt's complaint against him had bypassed without explanation. On the morning of the 3rd day, a letter arrived at Gerald's office. The complaint had been reviewed and found without merit. The matter was closed. No further action would be taken. Gerald read it standing at his desk. Then he read it again. 48 hours. From receipt to closure, 48 hours with no record of a single interview. No documentation request, no contact with Marcus, no contact with Gerald. That wasn't bureaucracy. That was a door being shut very quickly by someone who knew how to shut it. The letter was signed by an HR director named Warren Spade. Marcus added the name to his index cards. Then the leak happened. Marcus was asleep when his father called at 1:45 in the morning. He was sitting upright before the phone had rung twice. Gerald never called in the middle of the night. In all of Marcus's memory, it had not happened once. "They leaked your sealed record," Gerald said. His voice was controlled the way a controlled burn is controlled. "It's been posted on the Precinct Watch blog about an hour ago." Marcus was already moving to his laptop. The headline filled the screen. Academy trainees' hidden violent past exposed. The article was short and precise and surgical. It detailed an incident from 17 years ago when Marcus was 19, when he had defended himself against 3 men outside a parking garage. He had been charged with aggravated assault. The charge had been reviewed and dropped within 45 days. The record had been sealed by court order. Every one of those facts was in the article. Accessing a sealed record through a law enforcement database without legal cause was a federal crime. The blog had not done that themselves. Someone inside the department had. Someone with a login, a terminal, and a willingness to use both to destroy a man's reputation on a Thursday night. Marcus closed the laptop. He sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, in complete stillness, and breathed. By morning, the damage had spread in every direction. The HR review was postponed indefinitely. The journalist who had been preparing a profile on the pattern of complaints at the facility pulled back, citing pressure from the paper's ownership. The department's spokesperson issued a statement praising Holt's 20 years of service and affirming confidence in the integrity of the training program. Lena Vasquez went quiet. Marcus sent 2 messages. Neither delivered. He understood. When you have already survived one collision with this machine, you do not stand in its way twice for someone you barely know. Sonia sent a 2-word text from her unknown number. "I'm sorry." Marcus put his phone face down on the kitchen table and didn't touch it for 3 hours. When his father arrived that evening, without calling ahead, carrying coffee from the place on Carver Street that Marcus had loved since he was a kid, Marcus was still sitting at the same table. Gerald set a cup in front of him and sat down across from him. "They committed a federal crime to stop you," Gerald said. "Accessing a sealed juvenile record through a law enforcement database without documented legal cause. That is not a department policy matter. That is a criminal act." Marcus wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "It means they're scared," Gerald said. "Doesn't feel like it." "It never does from inside it," Gerald said, and he didn't try to make that sound better than it was. They sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time, the notepad with the 3 names between them, and nothing else needed to be said. Gerald arrived at 7:00 the next morning carrying his briefcase. Not as a father this time, as an attorney. The briefcase landed on the kitchen table, and Gerald was already unclipping it. "I've been up since 4:30, he said. "Here's what I see." He laid it out flat and clear. The database access that pulled Marcus's sealed record had a trail, a timestamp, a login, a chain of digital custody that led back to a specific person sitting at a specific terminal inside the department. Whoever had done it had used law enforcement credentials to do it, which meant it was not just traceable, it was provable. "I'm filing an emergency motion this morning," Gerald said, "demanding a full investigation into the record's access. The motion goes to the court and simultaneously to the State Attorney General and the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Marcus looked up, the DOJ. The moment this became a federal records violation in the context of a civil rights complaint, it stopped being a local matter. They cannot bury a DOJ inquiry the way Spade buried the HR complaint. They don't have that kind of reach. Marcus turned it over slowly, looking for the weakness. He couldn't find one. "Do it," he said. Gerald filed from his office at 9:30. Marcus sat across the desk and watched him sign. The notifications to the AG and the DOJ went out simultaneously, time-stamped and receipted. It felt like the beginning of something that couldn't be stopped. They were back at the law office at 3:00 in the afternoon when the call came in. Gerald's assistant appeared in the doorway with an expression Marcus couldn't quite categorize. Gerald picked up, listened for about 8 seconds. "Hold on, please." He put the call on speaker. "My son is in the room, go ahead." The voice on the other end was even and deliberate, the voice of someone who had scripted nothing and was being completely precise. "Mr. Ellery, my name is Captain Diane Acaffer. I'm stationed at the Westfield facility. I've been documenting Sergeant Holt's conduct for nearly 4 years. I have personnel records, cross-referenced HR filings, incident reports, and 11 hours of footage from the facility's security cameras. A beat. I have been waiting for a case strong enough to carry the weight of what I have. I believe yours is that case. I'd like to meet." The office went completely still. 11 hours, security cameras covering the training ground, the open field, the moment before the drill began. Marcus looked at his father. Gerald gave him a single nod. "Our office, tomorrow, 8 in the morning, Gerald said into the phone. "I'll be there," Acaffer said, and the line went quiet. Captain Diane Acaffer arrived 3 minutes early. She came alone, no attorney, no representative, no buffer. She checked the hallway before stepping through the door and pulled it closed herself. She was in her early 50s, with silver-streaked natural hair pulled back tightly, and the kind of bearing that comes from decades of watching your face very carefully in a world that punishes unguarded expressions. She carried a sealed external drive and a bound folder of documents. She set them on Gerald's desk like she was setting down something she had been holding for a very long time. She looked at Marcus directly. "I want to be clear about something before we start. I'm not here because of your case specifically. I'm here because I have watched this happen 4 times, and I have been waiting for a case the department couldn't quietly swallow." "I understand," Marcus said. She opened the folder. The security camera mounted under the rear eave of the building had been positioned to monitor the equipment shed. What Holt had never confirmed was its horizontal sweep. Its field of view extended across the full training ground at a slight diagonal. It covered everything. Acaffer opened the hard drive on Gerald's laptop. She navigated directly to the file without searching. She had watched it enough times to know exactly where it lived. The training ground appeared on screen, trainees in white shirts assembled in the morning light, the tree line dark and still at the far edge, then Holt moving across the frame toward Cole Beaumont before the drill began. The lean-in. 2 seconds, maybe 3, Cole's nod, the edge of his mouth pulling up. Then the drill. Marcus watched himself on the footage from the outside for the first time. The precise, efficient movement. Cole going down once, then twice, then face first into the dirt with dust rising around him. Holt standing with arms folded in his pressed uniform, badge bright in the morning sun, his jaw tightening at the end. Marcus had lived through that moment. Watching it from this angle was something else entirely. "Audio?" Gerald asked. "None. Camera doesn't carry sound." Acaffer pointed at the screen. "But the instruction, the nod, and what follows immediately after tells the story without a single word." She set the footage aside and opened the documentation. 4 years of careful, methodical work. She had cross-referenced every complaint filed through the training program against the HR administrator who processed them. Warren Spade's name appeared on every Parcher-related filing, every one. Akaffer had gone further. She had obtained the department's internal social registry, a document tracking officer participation in departmental recreational programs. Holt and Spade were both listed in the weekend hunting club. Attendance records showed them present together at the same organized events 11 times over the past 3 years. Gerald read through the documents without speaking. His pen moved steadily. "Spade accessed my son's sealed record," he said, not looking up. "His login is on the database access trail," Akaffer said. "It's already there. The AG just needs to pull it." Gerald set his pen down. He looked at the hard drive. Then he looked at Captain Akaffer. "This ends Holt," he said. She looked back at him without blinking. "It ends more than Holt." The clip was 14 seconds long. Sonia posted it from a secure journalism advocacy account connected to a local news outlet. No article, just the clip, a timestamp, a caption that read, "Security footage, Westfield Training Facility, Sergeant Vincent Holt, moments before the drill." 14 seconds of Holt in full Navy uniform leaning into Cole Beaumont's ear on the sunlit training ground. The tree line at the edge of the frame. Cole's slow nod. The corner of his mouth pulling up. By noon it had been viewed 60,000 times. Marcus sat at his kitchen table and watched the notification count climb on his phone. He responded to none of them. His father's office would handle the press. Marcus's job right now was to wait. At 2:40 in the afternoon his phone rang, a number he recognized. "Lena Vasquez." He answered before the second ring. "I watched it," she said, no greeting, no warm-up. "I watched it 7 times. She was quiet for a moment. "That's what he did before my incident. The same lean, the same whisper to the drill partner. I saw it happen across the field and told my attorney about it afterward. She said without audio it proved nothing." Her voice was steady but tight. "I never stopped thinking about that moment. I watched your clip 7 times and I still couldn't catch my breath." Marcus said nothing. He gave her the space. "I'll testify," Lena said. "Full name on the record, wherever this goes." That afternoon, Gerald amended the federal civil rights filing to incorporate Lena's testimony formally. What had started as a complaint against one sergeant for one incident was now something much harder to dismiss. A documented pattern, multiple victims, multiple years, multiple levels of institutional protection built around the same engine of harm. Sonia submitted a written account that evening, detailed and chronological, what she had seen on the drill ground, the pre-drill exchange, Cole's escalation, Marcus's controlled response, Holt's expression at the end of it. She attached her full name. Marcus made a note to call her in the morning. The hearing was held in the Federal District Building on Whitmore Street. Marble floors and fluorescent lights, and a security desk staffed by people who had seen every kind of case and showed nothing about it in their faces. Marcus and Gerald arrived 30 minutes early and sat in the corridor outside the hearing room on wooden chairs that had probably held 1,000 different kinds of trouble. Marcus sat straight, hands folded, eyes forward. At 8:55, Gerald put a hand briefly on his son's shoulder. "It's enough," he said. The panel consisted of 3 federal reviewers behind a long table with water glasses and thick folders, a court reporter who was already typing. Pammy Oliver's counterpart, a journalist named Rhea Park, sat in the public gallery with her recorder running. Vincent Holt sat beside his attorney in a dark suit, back straight, face composed into something that was working very hard at looking like dignity. Marcus took his seat. He did not look at Holt. Captain Akaffer testified first. 3.5 years of documentation laid out with the precision of someone who had organized it specifically to be impossible to dismiss. She named dates. She named case numbers. She connected Warren Spade to every Holt-related HR filing with documented specificity. She presented the demographic data. In 9 years of running the training program, Holt had filed formal complaints against 11 trainees. 8 of them were black. All 8 were processed out of the program. The 3 white trainees who received complaints for documented, witnessed infractions had been given remediation plans and completed the program. 8-0. Marcus looked at that number in the folder in front of him and sat with it for a moment. Then the footage played. The pale dirt training ground, the tree line, the trainees assembled in white, Holt crossing the frame toward Cole Beaumont in his full-pressed uniform, the lean-in, Cole's nod, the edge of his mouth. Holt's attorney objected during playback. The pre-drill exchange was ambiguous, he said. It could have been any instruction. Nothing in the footage demonstrated discriminatory intent. The panel chair asked for the footage to be played again. Then a third time. After the third viewing, the panel chair made a long note and did not look at the attorney. Cole Beaumont was brought in as a witness in civilian clothes. He had been offered reduced disciplinary action in exchange for full cooperation. He had taken the offer. He confirmed all of it. Holt's pre-drill instruction: make it hard for the new guy. The complaint language dictated to Cole word for word by Holt the evening after the drill while Cole sat in the office and typed. The marks on Cole's arm, applied deliberately at Holt's direction to support the physical injury claim in the complaint. Every word of it on the record. Lena Vasquez testified last. She sat in the witness chair with her back straight and her hands folded and spoke for 26 minutes without notes. Her account of her removal from the training program was delivered with the spare, unflinching clarity of someone who had rehearsed nothing, because the facts were already memorized from years of living with them. When she finished, the room was entirely silent. Holt's attorney had stopped writing on his notepad several minutes before she concluded. Holt sat rigid in his chair, jaw tight, staring at the surface of the table in front of him. The panel chair looked up from his notes. He studied Holt for a long, unhurried moment. Then he began to write. Warren Spade was arrested on a Monday morning. Federal investigators arrived at the department building at 9:10. 2 of them, plainclothes, badges visible, moving through the corridor with the unhurried certainty of people who already have everything they need and are simply completing a process. They found Spade at his desk in the HR division, coffee in his hand, monitor on. He didn't run. He didn't argue. He went very still, the way a person goes still when the thing they have been quietly dreading finally arrives and introduces itself. They walked him out through the main corridor in handcuffs. Uniformed officers watched from the hallway. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. 2 of them looked at the floor. One looked directly at Spade for the full length of the corridor and did not look away. Nobody moved to help him. The charges were unlawful disclosure of sealed records and official misconduct. Both federal. Both attached to a database trail that led directly back to his login credentials, his workstation, and a timestamp showing he had accessed Marcus's record on the same evening Holt's complaint against Marcus had been buried without a single interview. 26 years in human resources ended in a Monday morning walk down a corridor he would not return to. Vincent Holt's termination was processed the same afternoon. The federal panel's findings had been delivered to the department the previous evening, precise in language, devastating in implication, no room for alternative interpretation. Holt was terminated effective immediately. His pension, 20 years of it, stripped under the federal civil rights finding. A criminal referral was forwarded to the federal prosecutor. Cole Beaumont received a formal disciplinary suspension and a permanent bar from the training program. His cooperation had reduced his exposure. It had not eliminated it. He would carry the weight of what he had chosen to do and who he had chosen to be into every professional context he entered from here forward. The police commissioner submitted his resignation on Wednesday morning. His statement, 3 paragraphs released through his attorney, acknowledged in the 3rd paragraph, in careful institutional language, that the department had failed to adequately review and respond to complaints of discriminatory conduct within its training programs. It was not a full admission. Gerald said it never would be at this stage with civil litigation pending, but it was a public acknowledgement, attached to a name, entered into the permanent record of the department's history. The following morning, Deputy Commissioner Adriana Tillman was appointed interim commissioner. She had built her career quietly inside the department over 23 years without the political debts that accumulated around people who traded in favors. Her first public statement acknowledged departmental failure without qualification and without the soft language that institutional press offices use to make failure sound like a procedural lapse. Her second act was a phone call. Marcus was at the kitchen table when it came through. Late afternoon, the amber light that he had sat with through most of this coming through the window at the same angle it always did. Tillman identified herself without preamble. She said she had been briefed fully on the case, the pattern, the documentation, and the outcomes. Then she said, "We failed you. I want you to come back." Simple, direct, no cushioning. Marcus looked out the window for a moment. "I'll be there Monday," he said. Lena Vasquez received her reinstatement offer by certified letter 2 days later. Full reinstatement to the training program, back pay covering 2.5 years, a formal written apology from the department, signed by Interim Commissioner Tillman personally. Gerald called Marcus when the letter was confirmed delivered. "She accepted," Marcus said. "She did," Gerald said, "and she told me to pass something along to you." A brief pause. "She said she has 8 years of unfinished business, and she intends to finish it." Marcus smiled, small and quiet, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and doesn't need an audience. He set his phone down on the kitchen table beside the notepad with the 3 names. And for the first time since he had sat in that parking lot on the morning of day 3, reading a complaint that had been built specifically to erase him, the table didn't feel like a war room. It felt like a place where something was complete. The ceremony was short. Interim Commissioner Adriana Tillman stood at the front of a room on the 3rd floor of the main precinct building, not the annex, the main building, which Marcus noted and understood. There were maybe 35 people in the room. Officers, administrators, a few journalists. Sonia Adami stood near the back in her training whites, 3 weeks away from graduation, having found a reason to be in this particular building on this particular afternoon. Tillman presented Marcus his badge without a speech. She had chosen not to give one. A speech would have been for the department. The badge, handed from her hand to his in front of cameras and witnesses with nothing softening it, was for him. Marcus took it. He looked at it for a moment in his palm, the weight of it settling into him. Then he clipped it to his belt. The room cleared gradually. Handshakes, brief words, people moving back toward their days. Sonia caught his eye across the room and gave him one deliberate nod. He returned it. Gerald was the last person in the room beside his son. He stood by the window looking out at the parking lot below, giving Marcus the space of the moment without leaving it entirely. When the last person filed out and the door closed, he turned. They looked at each other. There are no words large enough for some things, and Gerald Ellery had spent 3 decades learning that the attempt to find those words usually diminishes the thing you were trying to describe. So he crossed the room and put his hand briefly on the back of his son's neck. The same gesture he had used 25 years ago when Marcus was 14 years old, sitting at his mother's kitchen table, listening to his Uncle Raymond describe what had happened on a routine drive home. Then he let go. "Dinner tonight," Gerald said. "I'll be there," Marcus said. The training facility was a 10-minute drive. Marcus parked in the same spot he had used on day one, sat in the car for a moment, looked at the brick building, the narrow windows, the flag on its pole. It looked the same. It was not the same. He was not the same. He got out and walked inside. The hallway was quiet in the late afternoon. He walked without hurrying until he reached the rear exit at the end of the corridor and pushed through it. The training ground was empty. The late sun sat low behind the tree line, throwing long shadows out across the pale dirt and scrubbed grass. The field looked softer in this light than it had under the full summer glare of that afternoon. The colors muted, the hard edges gone, the trees at the far boundary standing quiet and still. Marcus walked to the center of the field. This was where Cole Beaumont had gone down 3 times, while trainees in white shirts stood at the edges and said nothing. This was where a sergeant's jaw had tightened and a decision had been made. This was where an 8-year machine had shown its first visible crack, because one person had simply refused to give it what it needed to keep running. He crouched and pressed one hand flat against the ground. The dirt was dry and firm under his palm. He held it there for a moment. Then he stood. He thought about Devon Ashworth, somewhere out of state with no forwarding address. He thought about Priya Chandran, who had a daughter now and a life she had rebuilt from nothing, and had made the only choice available to her. He thought about Lena Vasquez, who had 8 years of unfinished business and was coming back to finish it. He thought about Sonia, standing against the back wall this afternoon in her training whites, still showing up every morning, still doing the thing even when the thing was hard. He thought about the next person who would walk out onto this field on their first day, someone he would never meet beforehand, someone who didn't know his name, someone who would come with a purpose and a plan and no reason yet to expect what was waiting. That person would walk into a different program than the one Marcus had walked into. Not a perfect one, but different, changed by what had happened here, by what had been documented and proven and placed into the permanent record of this institution's history. Marcus stood in the center of the field in the fading afternoon light, and felt for the first time without qualification that it had been worth it. Not the easy worth it. The real kind. The kind that costs something and stays with you long after the moment has passed. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Sonia, one line. "First day back tomorrow." Marcus looked around the empty field, the long shadows, the still tree line, the pale dust where the ground had been packed smooth by years of people doing hard things. He typed back, "First day." He walked to the door, pushed it open, stepped into the corridor. Behind him, the door swung shut. Ahead of him, the hallway stretched forward, bright and open and waiting. Marcus Ellery walked toward it. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe. Tomorrow's story is one you are not going to want to miss. I've picked 2 more stories on the screen right now that I think you'll love. Go watch one. Have a wonderful day.